Hello and welcome to BYJU'S. September 2018, in a landmark verdict, the Supreme Court decriminalized homosexuality. The Supreme Court also reaffirmed its commitment to constitutional morality and also upheld the LGBT community's right to love. In this lecture, let us look at what is this Section 377. We'll be looking at various petitions filed against Section 377. We will be closely analyzing the verdict of the Honorable Court, and then we will look at the way forward. So let's get started, beginning with the text of Section 377 of Indian Penal Code. Whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of nature, be it with any man, woman, or an animal, it is a crime. And you can be sentenced to life imprisonment. You can be sentenced to a jail term, which may extend to 10 years, and you may also be liable to pay the fine. But what is this carnal intercourse against the order of nature? The explanation is any sexual activity, any sexual interaction which is not peno-vaginal in nature, it is against the order of nature and as such is a crime. But this section was particularly used to target LGBT community, lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgenders. And the irony was that you could be arrested on mere suspicion as well. You see two boys hand-holding each other at a public place, you could get them arrested on the grounds that they are violating Section 377 because it criminalizes homosexuality. 2001, an NGO, Naz Foundation, petitioned the Delhi High Court, pleaded before the Delhi High Court that Section 377 should be declared unconstitutional. Why? Among many other arguments put forward by the Naz Foundation, one argument was that we are working with people from MSM community, men having sex with men. And we see that there is a surge in the incidence of HIV/AIDS amongst this community, men having sex with men. So if we have to provide proper medical attention, proper medical care to these individuals, it is imperative that Section 377 is read down and homosexuality is decriminalized. Why? Because there are many people in this country who do not own up to their sexuality because they fear the law. Even if they are suffering from HIV/AIDS, they will not claim that they are homosexuals because police will get them arrested and they will be prosecuted under Section 377. So the best way to provide proper medical attention and care to these individuals is to first decriminalize homosexuality so that these people can own up to their sexuality and treatment can be given. 2009, a two-judge bench of the Delhi High Court headed by Justice A.P. Shah, ruled that Section 377 of Indian Penal Code is unconstitutional. Why? Because it violates Article 14, which talks about right to equality. Why? Because it violates Article 15, which talks about non-discrimination. Why? Because it violates Article 21, which talks about right to life and personal liberty. And please understand, a right to life also includes a right to live with dignity. Since Articles 14, 15, 21 are getting violated by Section 377, it is unconstitutional. This judgment of the Delhi High Court was celebrated by many. Many people thought that Indian democracy is now coming to life. Many people thought that this is a welcome judgment which celebrates plurality, diversity in this country. And immediately, one constitutional authority came into the picture, and that was Election Commission of India. Election Commission of India said, till date, if you had to contest an election, if you had to register as a voter, you had to either claim that you are male or female. Now we are giving you a third option, others. Instead of choosing either male or female, you can choose your third gender, others. And for the first time, transgender community could contest elections under this category others, because previously they had to contest election either as male or female. But then as this movement was celebrated throughout 2013, when this matter went to the Supreme Court said Section 377 is not unconstitutional. Section 377 is constitutional, and Section 377 was retained on the statute books of this country. This came to be known as the Koshal Judgement. So effectively, this Koshal Judgement reversed the judgment of the Delhi High Court, because the Delhi High Court had ruled Section 377 is unconstitutional. And now in 2013, the Supreme Court is saying Section 377 will continue. Homosexuality is criminalized again. Why did Supreme Court rule this way? I'm going to tell you slightly later. Then came April 2014, National Legal Services Authority judgment. The Supreme Court recognized transgender as a third gender in this country. The Supreme Court said that recognizing the third gender is not only a social issue, is not only a medical issue, but it is a human rights issue. The Supreme Court judgment was significant, historic. Why? Because it challenged the dominant view of gender that we view in a society. It challenged this binary of male, female, men, women, boy, girl, and upheld the diversity in this country. The Supreme Court also directed the state that you should take affirmative action policy for the transgender community because they have been victimized. You can treat them as minorities, and affirmative action policy can be directed towards them. The Supreme Court judgment was remarkable because the Supreme Court recognized that the individual experience of gender is one of the most significant fundamental aspects of self-determination, dignity, and freedom. So this 2014 judgment recognized transgender as a third gender. So the binary that we had created in our society was dispelled, and now we have a third gender in the society. But if you look at this 2014 judgment and 2013 judgment, in 2013 judgment, homosexuality was recriminalized. So I am confused. If I am a gay, my right to choose my gender has been recognized in 2014, but I will still be prosecuted for having gay sex because my gender has been recognized, but not my right to love. Homosexuality, despite this 2014 judgment, continued to be a crime. Then came Dr. Shashi Tharoor, a two-time member of parliament from the Congress party. He tried to introduce a private member's bill in Lok Sabha. And he wanted that Section 377 should be read down so that homosexuality is decriminalized. But this bill was not even allowed to be tabled in Lok Sabha. Then what Supreme Court did? The final hope was in 2016. Supreme Court referred this matter to a constitution bench. And now the 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court would decide whether Section 377 will continue or whether homosexuality will be decriminalized. So if we need to recap, 2009, a 2-judge bench of the Delhi High Court says Section 377 is unconstitutional. 2013, Supreme Court is saying Section 377 is constitutional. 2014, the same Supreme Court is recognizing transgender as a third gender. And now Supreme Court Constitution bench will have to decide what is going to be the future of homosexuality in this country. But meanwhile, something else happened. The privacy judgment of the Supreme Court. A 9-judge Constitution bench of the Supreme Court unanimously agreed that right to privacy is a fundamental right under Article 21 of Indian Constitution. Justice Chandrachud wrote in his judgment, no matter whom you love, what you eat, what you drink, what you wear is none of the business of the state. So many people thought that this privacy judgment will have a huge role to play in decriminalizing homosexuality. Because if in this privacy judgment, Supreme Court has clearly stated that it is none of the business of the state to interfere in the private bedroom of two consenting adults, Section 377 will be deleted. But before we analyze the judgment of the Supreme Court, wherein the Supreme Court decriminalized homosexuality, let us look at the argument of those who opposed the decriminalization of homosexuality. And these people talk about culture. Let us look at this culture argument. What are these movies, art forms, books, paintings, so on and so forth? These are mirrors to the society. Whatever is happening in the society, writers write books, filmmakers make movies, painters draw their paintings, sculptors do their work, so on and so forth. Look at the temples of Khajuraho. They openly depict gay sex. That means homosexuality is something which was prevalent at that point in time. The most widely worshipped form of Lord Shiva, Ardhana Rishwar. What is it? Half male, half female. Diversity. Lord Ram gave significant power to transgender community to bless important ceremonies such as childbirth. So transgenders are celebrated in Ramayana. Hazrat Bulle Bulla Shah, he used to dress as women and dance with the eunuchs and was performing raqs. Mir Taqi Mir, one of the most celebrated Urdu poets, in his poetry extolled his love for fellow men. So homosexuality is something that was part of our culture. Homosexuality is something that was celebrated in our culture. This celebration of our diversity was converted into a binary by the British. When British entered into the picture and created a binary of our genders, male, female, no other diversity. That means this argument that homosexuality is against our culture does not stand because history does not agree with that. There is another argument put forward by those who opposed homosexuality, that homosexuality is against the order of nature. This is a medieval Christian concept. According to this concept, the only purpose of having sex is to produce children. That means sex for recreation, sex for fun is against the order of nature. And in a 21st century democratic republic, we cannot apply the medieval Christian thoughts. So this argument is also invalid. There are others who say homosexuality is unnatural. But what is natural and what is unnatural? Who will decide this? Homosexuality is found in over 1,000 species, so clearly it cannot be something which we can term unnatural. But there are others who claim homosexuality is a disorder. But American Psychiatry Association way back in 1973 removed homosexuality from the list of disorders. World Health Organization in 1992 also removed homosexuality from the list of disorders. Our own law, 2017 Mental Health Care Act, it expressly prohibits discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation. That means those who are homosexuals cannot be dubbed as suffering from mental disorders. So homosexuality is clearly not a disorder. So one, homosexuality is not against our culture. Homosexuality is not against the order of nature. Homosexuality is not unnatural. Homosexuality is not a disorder. But let's assume for a while that homosexuality is a disorder. And those suffering from these disorders, do we have to treat them or do we have to club them? But let's, for the sake of argument, assume that homosexuality is a disorder. But it is only a disorder then. It is not a crime. If there is a disorder, you have to treat those people suffering from those disorders. You cannot treat patients as criminals. Now let us look at the views of legal experts. Kapil Sibal, one of India's legal luminary and also the former Law Minister of India. He says that a person's sexuality is his or her most precious and most private of rights. Almost all the constitutional experts and legal experts, they are unanimous in their view that Section 377 goes against the principles of equality, non-discrimination, and dignity, which are part of our Constitution. Now, let us look at the reasoning provided by the Supreme Court in 2013, wherein they reversed the judgment of the Delhi High Court and recriminalized homosexuality in this country. Reasoning number one, onus is on the parliament, not the courts. Supreme Court said, Indian Penal Code, of which 377 is a part of, has been amended more than 30 times since the independence. And in all these years, the parliament did not deem it fit to either delete Section 377 or revert Section 377. So we cannot do that. Let Parliament take a call. If they want to delete Section 377, let them do it. We will not interfere. In this case, the Supreme Court performed something what we call judicial evasion. They decided not to interfere in this case. Second reasoning of the Supreme Court said, ironically, that LGBT community is a minuscule minority. And for such minuscule minority, we should not have a law. Third reasoning, Nas Foundation pleaded before the Supreme Court that members of the LGBT community have been victimized, abused. Members of the LGBT community have been thrown into the jails on mere suspicion as well. Supreme Court said that is not our problem. If the law is being misused, that's the problem of the parliament, not the courts. And many people criticize the Supreme Court judgment, this Koshal judgment of 2013. But now let's look at the global picture. In 2002, there was a case wherein in Europe, the gender that has been assigned to an individual at the time of the birth, you could not change this gender in your certificates. That means once a gender has been assigned, it will remain permanently your gender for your entire life. In Christine Goodwin versus the United Kingdom, the European Court of Human Rights held that disallowing transsexuals to change their birth certificates or marrying in their own gender is a breach of European Convention on Human Rights. That's the global picture. And Britain, which imposed Section 377 on the people of this country, in their own country, they have already decriminalized homosexuality. But now the justice has finally arrived, and arrived in the form of Navte Johar versus Union of India. And in this landmark verdict, 5 judges of the Constitution bench, by a majority verdict of 5-0, declared that homosexuality is not a crime. Let us look at the arguments put forward by the Supreme Court judges while ruling that homosexuality is no longer a crime in this country. If you look at this judgment, there is a strong South African flavor, drawing from the South African Constitutional Court's vision of transformative constitutionalism. Chief Justice of India, Justice Deepak Misra, wrote in his judgment that Constitution should be viewed as a living document, and this Constitution should be in a position to transform the lives of the people. The purpose of the Constitution is to transform a society. That's the most beautiful part of this judgment. The second most important part of this judgment is the principle of non-retrogression of rights, which means that as a society, when it has been given a certain set of rights, and because of these rights, the society has reached a certain standard, we cannot take away these rights after that. When in right to privacy judgment, we gave right to privacy to the people of this country, we cannot now snatch this privacy from LGBT community. So there is this principle of non-retrogression of rights. The remarks of Justice Rohinton Fali Nariman. We have a North Star. North Star appears motionless in the sky, fixed. And all the stars in the northern hemisphere appear rotating around it. Because of its fixed location, it becomes an excellent fixed point from which we can draw the measurements for navigation, for astronomy. As students of geography, you would know better than me about the significance of this North Star. But Rohinton Fali Nariman says that fundamental rights chapter is like the North Star in the universe of constitutionalism in India. So we have to look at everything from the perspective of this chapter of fundamental rights. And if the fundamental rights chapter talks about equality, non-discrimination, dignity, then we have to provide all these features to the LGBT community. Another brilliant point in this judgment is the presumption of constitutionality. There is a doctrine which is followed by the Supreme Court called Presumption of Constitutionality. That means whenever Parliament makes a law, frames a law, and this law is challenged in the Supreme Court begins with the assumption that this law is constitutional. Only when it is proven otherwise that the Supreme Court will strike this law down. That means there is always this presumption that the laws made by the Parliament are constitutional. But Supreme Court in this judgment said there is no presumption of constitutionality when laws are made by the colonial foreign regime. This is a brilliant statement, a brilliant statement. Why? Because this judgment of the Supreme Court can have an impact on other colonial laws as well. For example, sedition, for example, adultery. That's the significance of this judgment. If you look at this judgment, there were many quotes quoted by honorable judges of the Supreme Court. Chief Justice of India quoted a German thinker, "I am what I am, and take me as I am." Similarly, Justice Chandrachud quoted Walter Benjamin, "There is no document of civilization which is not at the same time a document of barbarism." He writes, civilization has been brutal, and civilization has been brutal for the members of LGBT community. Justice Indu Malhotra, the only woman judge on the panel, she sought apology from the LGBT community for the historic injustices meted out to the community. But the stirring message of this judgment is social morality cannot trump constitutional morality. What is moral to you may be immoral to me and vice versa. So which morality do we have to take into account? Constitutional morality, which should trump every other notion of morality in the society. And this judgment is the reaffirmation of the right to love. Now, what is the current status of Section 377? Section 377 is not deleted from the Indian Penal Code, but Section 377 cannot be used to criminalize homosexuality. But Section 377 will still apply in case of bestiality. Having sex with animals. Having sex with animals is unnatural, against the order of nature, because animals cannot give consent. Since it is non-consensual sexual activity, Section 377 will apply. Section 377 will apply in case of men or women trying to have sex with the minors. And in that case, Section 377 will apply. But then what is the way forward? This is where we encounter the role of the legislature. The question before the judiciary was a very limited one, to check whether homosexuality can continue as a crime or not. And Supreme Court made the right choice and decriminalized homosexuality because it goes against the fundamental rights of the citizens of this country. But then what about their right to marry? What about adoption? What about inheritance? And the road ahead is going to be slightly tricky for the LGBT community. Why? Because legislature, unless and until the legislature decides to make suitable laws, right to marry, right to adopt, right to inheritance may not be provided to the LGBT community. What is the reason? The reason is that laws related to marriage, adoption, inheritance are governed by the personal laws of the communities. Hindu Marriages Act explicitly makes it clear that the marriageable age for a bridegroom is 21 and for the bride it is 18. Bridegroom and bride, that means male and female. That means Hindu Marriages Act does not envisage marriage between the same sexes. Similarly, Muslim personal law, it also talks about marriage between man and a woman. In fact, the secular law, Special Marriages Act, also talks about marriage between man and a woman. So they do not talk about, the laws do not talk about same-sex marriages. Similar is the case with adoption, similar is the case with inheritance. But there are others who say that Supreme Court should follow the route of the Supreme Court of United States of America. Because in 2016, the United States of America Supreme Court in Obergefell versus Hodges declared that all the 50 states in the United States of America should also provide for gay marriages in this country because not allowing gay marriages goes against the constitutional rights of the members of the LGBT community. So there are people who are saying that Indian Supreme Court should also follow the US Supreme Court and allow gay marriages, adoption, inheritance to the members of the LGBT community. But it is better that Parliament take a call and decide to suitably amend the laws related to marriage, adoption, inheritance, because then legislature will cede its powers to legislate to the judiciary, which goes against the principle of separation of powers. So that is it regarding Section 377 of Indian Penal Code. If you like this video, please drop in your comments and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.